KRISTI Noem sat in the Situation Room, staring at a classified report that had just landed on her desk. The room was dimly lit, filled with the quiet hum of computer monitors and the muted voices of intelligence officers exchanging information. The words on the paper in front of her made her stomach twist. Confirmed human trafficking operation. Coordinated effort. High-level political cover. Destinations: Chicago, New York, Los Angeles. She inhaled sharply and pushed the paper away as if its contents might burn her. The past few months had been filled with whispers, rumors of unauthorized flights, unregistered vehicles, and large groups of undocumented migrants appearing in cities overnight. But this was more than speculation now. This was proof. And the worst part? Some of the names in the report weren't those of cartel leaders or foreign agents. They were names of sitting Democratic officials. She ran a hand through her dark brown hair, glancing at her top aides. "Tell me this isn't real." Across the table, an older intelligence officer, James Rourke, a grizzled veteran of counterintelligence, adjusted his glasses. "It's real. And it's big." Noem exhaled slowly. "How many?" "We have direct evidence of at least 5 lawmakers involved," Rourke said, pulling up a list on his tablet. 2 senators, 1 governor, and 2 mayors. Their involvement ranges from turning a blind eye to actively coordinating safe routes. She clenched her jaw. "And who's funding it?" "Mostly NGOs," another officer chimed in. "Some of them are legitimate humanitarian organizations that were manipulated. Others are fronts, shell companies with money funneled from foreign donors. A lot of it's been hidden under the guise of refugee aid." A cold anger burned in Noem's chest. This wasn't about humanitarianism. This was about power, power through chaos. Someone was engineering a crisis, feeding instability, and exploiting the system. She closed the folder and folded her arms. "Who else knows? Right now, just us." "But we can't contain this forever," Rourke said. "The moment this leaks, there's going to be a war in Washington." She already knew that. The political fallout would be nuclear. Noem took a deep breath, forcing herself to think methodically. There was no time for emotion. This was the moment she had trained for, the reason she had been given this job. "All right," she said. "We go dark on this. No outside communication. Only face-to-face briefings from this moment forward." Rourke nodded. "Understood." Noem turned to a younger analyst, Eric Dawson, who had uncovered the trafficking routes. "Eric, how airtight is this intel? Are we sure?" He hesitated. "Ma'am, I wouldn't have brought it to you if I wasn't. But if you want my personal opinion, the scale of this operation means we've barely scratched the surface. There's more out there. I'd bet my career on it." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Then we don't wait," she said. "We take action. Effective immediately. This ends now." 4 hours later, in the dead of night, black SUVs rolled into an abandoned airstrip in West Texas. The sky was moonless, the desert winds cutting across the tarmac. Inside one of the vehicles, KRISTI Noem sat in silence, watching through night vision binoculars as a private jet prepared for takeoff. This was it. Her intelligence reports had led her here. Flight 709, an unregistered aircraft making frequent landings along the southern border, always under cover of darkness. Tonight, they had it pinned. A voice crackled over her earpiece. "Ma'am, we have confirmation. Passengers are boarding. Small buses just pulled in." Noem's fingers tightened around her earpiece. "How many?" "At least 30 individuals. Mostly young men. A few women and children. They look confused, scared." She clenched her jaw. She had seen the tactics before. These migrants were pawns, shuffled around like cattle under the illusion that they were being given a better life. The reality: they were being smuggled into the interior, then abandoned. Noem turned to the team leader, a rugged DHS agent named Marco Valdez. "Do it." Seconds later, the darkness erupted into chaos. Floodlights snapped on, blinding the people near the plane. Tactical teams surged forward, rifles raised, shouts cutting through the night. "Federal agents! Get down! Hands where we can see them!" The pilots bolted for the cockpit, but before they could take off, tires were blown out by precision sniper shots. The plane skidded forward a few feet before grinding to a halt. Noem stepped out of the SUV, her boots crunching against the gravel. The migrants panicked, some raising their hands, others collapsing in exhaustion. They had no idea what was happening. But Noem wasn't looking at them. Her eyes were locked on the three men standing by the boarding stairs, men in expensive suits, men who should not have been anywhere near a human trafficking ring. Democratic Senator Aaron Mitchell, Mayor Lucas Ortez, and former White House advisor Henry Callaway. Mitchell's face turned ghostly pale as Noem walked up to him. "This is a mistake," he stammered. "You don't understand. Save it." Noem pulled out her phone and played an audio recording. A conversation, one recorded by a whistleblower, filled the air. Mitchell's own voice. "We just need to get them into the cities first. Once they're there, it's too late to turn them back. This keeps the machine running, keeps our voting base strong. No one will be able to stop us. DHS is already in on it. And if Noem sniffs around, we'll shut her down before she gets close." Silence. Mitchell looked like he might throw up. Noem smirked coldly. "You were saying—" Behind her, the tactical teams began making arrests. Agents cuffed Ortez and Callaway, securing them in the back of unmarked SUVs. Mitchell was still frozen in place. "You can't do this," he whispered. "You don't know what you're messing with." Noem stepped closer. "That's where you're wrong, Senator." She nodded to Valdez. Mitchell was shoved against the side of the SUV, his hands forced behind his back as the cuffs snapped shut. Noem turned away, ignoring his protests. She took a deep breath and looked up at the stars. This was only the beginning. The detention facility was cold, sterile, and quiet except for the low hum of security cameras and the distant murmur of guards exchanging orders. KRISTI Noem walked down the narrow hallway, her boots tapping against the concrete floor. Ahead, behind thick steel bars, sat the three men she had arrested. Senator Aaron Mitchell, Mayor Lucas Ortez, former White House advisor Henry Callaway. All three men looked exhausted, disheveled from the overnight detention. Mitchell's suit jacket was missing, his tie loosened. Ortez had a smudge of dirt on his sleeve from when DHS agents forced him into the SUV. Callaway's usual smug expression was gone, his pale face now a mask of quiet calculation. Noem stopped just outside the holding cell, folding her arms. "Start talking." No one moved. Senator Mitchell was the first to break the silence, exhaling sharply as he leaned back against the bench. "You've made a mistake, Noem." She tilted her head. "Oh." "Because from where I'm standing, I caught three men coordinating an illegal smuggling operation." Callaway let out a dry laugh. "Illegal? You're thinking too small." Noem stepped closer to the bars. "Then why don't you explain it to me?" The men exchanged glances. Mayor Ortez shook his head, rubbing his temples. "This isn't just about bringing people across the border. It's about control." Noem raised an eyebrow. "Control?" Mitchell sighed. "You ever wonder why the problem never gets solved? Why no administration, Republican or Democrat, ever really cracks down on the border?" She didn't answer. Callaway smirked. "Because they don't want to. It's not a crisis to them. It's a pipeline." Noem remained silent, but her hands clenched. Ortez leaned forward. "Think about it, Noem. What does big business need? Cheap labor. What do politicians need? Voters. What do activist groups need? A cause to fight for. Everyone wins, except for people like you, who think this is some kind of moral issue." Noem's expression darkened. "You flooded American cities with illegal migrants just to keep wages low and manipulate elections?" Mitchell smiled, shrugging. "Not just elections. Entire districts. You introduce millions of migrants into key urban areas, shift the demographics, and suddenly the old voter base doesn't matter anymore. It's a long-term investment. And by the time anyone realizes what's happening, it's already too late." Callaway chuckled. "And the best part? The media plays right into it. They push the humanitarian angle. They guilt-trip the public. They make sure no one asks the hard questions. Meanwhile, we build a permanent political majority without ever needing to win an actual debate." Noem's blood was boiling, but she kept her voice steady. How high does this go? Silence. She took a slow step forward. Who's running this? Ortez shook his head. You don't get it. There's no one person at the top. It's a network. Politicians, corporate donors, foreign interests. Hell, even elements of law enforcement are in on it. Everyone gets a piece. Mitchell exhaled, rubbing his wrists where the cuffs had been hours before. And you just exposed it. Which means you're in trouble. Noem smirked. You three look like the ones in trouble. Calloway's smile returned. That's where you're wrong. We don't matter. You think arresting us stops anything? No, Noem. Now they know you're a threat. And when people like you become a threat, he tapped the side of his temple. You disappear. A chill ran down Noem's spine, but she refused to let them see it. She turned to Mitchell. How many more are involved? Mitchell hesitated. Ortez shook his head. Don't answer that. Calloway leaned back, sighing. It's too late anyway. She already knows. And soon, they'll know she knows. Noem's stomach twisted. Mitchell leaned forward. Let me ask you something, Noem. How long have you been working intelligence? How many times have you seen people get close to the truth, only to end up dead in an accident? Heart attack, car crash, plane malfunction, suicide. He smiled faintly. You're next. She clenched her jaw. I'm not afraid of you. Calloway smirked. You should be. She stepped back, exhaling through her nose. Enjoy your time in here. Because when this is over, you'll all be rotting in prison. Ortez shook his head. We won't be in here long. A guard stepped into the room. Director, we have a situation. Noem turned sharply. What kind of situation? The guard hesitated. You need to see this. She cast one last glare at the detainees before turning and marching toward the hallway. In the security office, she was handed a tablet. Live satellite footage. Her stomach dropped. A black SUV was parked outside the detention facility. Two men in dark clothing were stepping out, hands in their jackets. Who are they? She asked. The agent monitoring the footage swallowed. We don't know. No plates. No digital trail. No cell phone pings. Noem's mind raced. She turned to the lead security officer. Lock down the facility. Nobody in or out. The officer hesitated. Ma'am, if these are federal agents. They're not, she snapped. Get me a tactical team. The officer relayed the order. Noem turned back to the monitor, watching the unknown men approach the entrance. Her heart pounded. The attack on the detention facility had failed. By the time KRISTI Noem and James Rourke secured the building, 3 gunmen lay dead, and the remaining intruders had fled. Noem had survived. But she knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, the federal government was in turmoil. The story was too big to suppress. The press ran with it, but this time, they couldn't spin it. The facts were undeniable. High-ranking Democratic officials had orchestrated a mass human smuggling operation for power, influence, and profit. Congress held emergency hearings. Senator Aaron Mitchell, Mayor Lucas Ortez, and Henry Calloway were formally charged with conspiracy, human trafficking, election fraud, and abuse of power. KRISTI Noem testified before Congress in a hearing that was broadcast to the entire nation. She sat before the Senate Judiciary Committee, calm and unwavering. These men did not act alone, she stated firmly. They were part of a system, a network that has operated in the shadows for years. They believed they were untouchable. They were wrong. The hearing room was silent. Even the Democrats on the panel struggled to defend their former allies. When asked why she had acted without consulting Congress, Noem did not back down. With all due respect, she said, looking directly at her critics, if I had waited for Washington to act, these criminals would still be walking free. The room erupted in applause. Even some moderate Democrats nodded in reluctant agreement. Months later, the trial of Mitchell, Ortez, and Calloway became the most watched court case in decades. The evidence was overwhelming. Wire transfers. Recorded conversations. Witness testimony. Even those who had initially defended them had to admit the truth. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before reaching a unanimous verdict. Guilty. All 3 men received life sentences. No parole. No deals. No escape. When the judge read the sentence, the American public cheered. Justice had been served. Months after the trial, KRISTI NOEM stood on the steps of the Capitol, addressing a massive crowd. "This was never about politics," she said. "It was about right and wrong. And today, justice has won." The crowd erupted in cheers. She had exposed the corruption, taken down some of the most powerful figures in Washington, and restored faith in the rule of law. Reporters asked if she would run for higher office. She only smiled. "For now, I'm just doing my job." But everyone knew the truth. KRISTI NOEM wasn't just a survivor. She was a leader. And she had won.